In a democracy, the right to vote is sacred, and we should be making it easier for people to cast their ballots, not harder. They believe that no one, including the president, is above the law, and that no public official, including the president, should use their office to enrich themselves or their supporters. They understand that in this democracy, the commander-in-chief does not use the men and women of our military who are willing to risk everything to protect our nation as political props to deploy against peaceful protesters on our own soil.
Let's bring in Tom Cotton, knows a lot about service. He does it and did it. He is a senator from Arkansas. Senator, your reaction to President Obama's reaction to President Trump's 3.5 years?
Brian, it was a pretty remarkable speech at a pretty remarkable day at the Democratic National Convention. I heard a lot of reasons why Donald Trump offends the delicate elite sensibilities of people like Barack Obama and Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton. I don't think I heard many or even any reasons to vote for Joe Biden. I mean, I understand that Donald Trump is living rent-free inside the heads of all these Democrats, having beaten them in 2016. But ultimately, the Democrats have to explain why America would be better off with Joe Biden as our president. They don't want to do that because Joe Biden is going to raise our taxes by $4 trillion. He's going to open our borders by decriminalizing illegal immigration. He's going to give free health care that you have to pay for to illegal immigrants while he takes away your insurance on the job.
Free college.
And if you didn't see those ideas, yeah, free college too. If you didn't see those ideas last night at the DNC, well, just tune in to the wacky daytime DNC when they tell you what they actually think. They have speakers talking about abolishing the police, not just defunding them, or ending capitalism. They don't want you to see those speeches while you're away at work because that's the true heart of the Democratic Party. That's what will happen if Joe Biden gets elected. That's why we must reelect Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, where's the fact checker regarding what Barack Obama just said? He said he used Donald Trump's using the military to stop the peaceful protesters. It's not the peaceful protest, it's the violent protesters, particularly, Senator, what we've seen in Portland. And breaking in the last 10 minutes, U.S. Attorney Billy Williams announced today that a Portland man by the name of Dakota Ray Horton, 24 years old, has been charged with assaulting a U.S. Marshal Service deputy with a baseball bat during a riot at the Mark Hatfield Courthouse in downtown Portland on July 27th. So the locals have trouble, rounding up the people who are breaking the laws, but ultimately it looks like the Department of Justice is going after them. And then there's this guy, Adam Hayner, who was attacked. We've shown the video. Here he is, listen to this, describing what happened to him. They're still looking for the guy who did this to him.
Someone was down there that got a bag taken. I seen the bag taken right in front of me, and I'm just like, they were hitting the person, so I just tried to step in between it. And then I got him away from her. By the end of it, I'm wrecked and unconscious on the side of the road. I don't know what they were down there for, but it didn't seem like they were trying to make anything good. They're just trying to make our city horrible.
Look at the black eyes on that guy. Senator, can you explain why they are not talking about the violence that is sweeping a number of American cities at the DNC?
Well, it's plain that the Democrats don't want to talk about the violence that you see in cities like Portland or Chicago and New York because they don't want to offend their far left-wing base. They also don't want to call attention to the consequences of defunding the police or abolishing the police or disrespecting the police, or what you see in Portland where they refuse to arrest any of these criminals who are attacking innocent citizens on the streets. They only do so once they're shamed by viral videos on social media or on television, and even then they usually release them the very next day without any serious charges. What they should do when they declare a riot, which happens almost every night in Portland these days, is arrest every single criminal and lock them up in prison with real consequences. Then people will think twice about coming out onto the streets to destroy property and to attack innocent citizens.
Okay, let's talk about Iran, because the president, he talked about his order for a snapback on the sanctions. He says if he's reelected, he can make a new deal. Listen to this.
The United States intends to restore virtually all of the previously suspended United Nations sanctions on Iran. It's a snapback. 2 years ago, I withdrew the United States from the disastrous Iran nuclear deal, which was a product of the Obama-Biden foreign policy failure. This deal funneled tens of billions of dollars to Iran, 150 billion to be exact, plus 1.8 billion in cash. Just another great deal that turned out to be a total disaster that would have funded all of the chaos and the bloodshed and the terror in the region.
So when he says restore suspended UN sanctions on Iran, what does that mean for the average American family?
Angela, it means that Iran is not going to be able to get tanks and fighter aircraft and helicopters and missiles to attack our troops and our citizens and our friends across the Middle East. This is just another reminder of how terrible Barack Obama and Joe Biden and John Kerry's Iran nuclear deal was. I said at the time that some of these deadlines are the blink of an eye in the life of a nation. The conventional weapons ban expires in just 2 months. We're going to restore that weapons ban to make sure Iran cannot import the world's deadliest weapons.
Senator, I think you know the Prime Minister of Iraq is going to be in the Oval Office today meeting with the President. And this Prime Minister is somebody who wants Iran out of his country as much as we want Iran out of that country. This is an opportunity. The President doesn't like the Iraq War. Everybody knows that. But do you see this as an opportunity, too, to back a Prime Minister who wants autonomy for its country and to reduce the influence of that horrible nation?
Brian, I think that's what President Trump hopes to accomplish. The new Iraqi prime minister does want all of these Iranian-controlled militias to stand down. He wants the people of Iran to be able to determine their future. President Trump accepted Iran or Iraq and the Middle East as he found it, which was going up in flames because Barack Obama and Joe Biden had allowed ISIS to rampage across the region. It was under President Trump watch that we smashed ISIS into so much desert sand. We're going to continue to build on that success. We're not going to let Iran run wild in the Middle East.
All right, Senator Tom Cotton joining us from the D.C. area. Senator, thank you very much.
Thank you.